If you're having any difficulties accessing anything in this video tutorial, please contact our help desk by email at aoe.gmshelp@vermont.gov or by phone at 802-479-1044. We will help you find alternative means to access this information. If you are looking for more information on accessing the GMS platform, please see the GMS user manual located in the training section of the GMS landing page. So we're now recording. This is the training session for completing the Tobacco Use Prevention Grant within the Grants Management System for FY19. My name is Dan Carrier. I'm being joined by Beth Keister at the Agency for Education. And today we're going to step through the process for completing that grant application, talk a little bit about some of the other processes that need to be completed, and just go over a little bit of GMS 101 basics if that's necessary. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to interrupt me or also to use the chat facility within GoToMeeting, and we'll make sure that those questions get responded to. Cindy, I'm going to pick on you because I can see that your phone line is open. Can you see the GMS logon page okay? She might have her phone muted, but Beth Keister, how are you doing? Are you able to see the logon page okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, a couple quick things. The page that I'm on right now is the main GMS landing page, and there have been various communications that have been sent out to your LEAs with the URL for this page, the main GMS landing page. I'm going to go ahead and just for highlighting the URL itself right here in case anybody needs to come into that separately if they don't have that. So you're able to see exactly how I got to this page. If anybody has any questions about that URL, I'll be glad to come back to that later there. Oh, thanks, Cindy. She just commented she was able to see everything okay. This main landing page is where feedback, our various training informations, details about grant dates and upcoming due dates are listed. In the training section, there's a link to a PDF user manual. There are a link to video tutorials about how to log into the system, how to complete central data and continuous improvement plans. This past 2 weeks, we've been out doing sessions across the state on completing the Consolidated Federal Programs, or CFP, application. The tobacco grant's a much smaller and more simple grant than the CFP, and so we're doing web-based training for this particular grant. Okay, Beth just mentioned that she's going to be sending out an email to everyone with the link to this logon page, and also in the chat facility to everyone, Frank Perricone, who's with the ADS there at the Agency of Education, just put the URL to the logon page if you don't have it already. Most of you, I'm sure several of you have logged in, some of you may not have. The process for logging in there's a video link of how to do that. The bottom line is you're going to put your work email address in here, and the first time you're logging on, click Forgot Password. You'll receive a temporary password and step through the change password process to be able to get access to the system. I'm actually going to step back into the test system right now where I can show you an example of a grant that is in development. And this is the test system, so nothing I do out here counts. I'm going to log in and I'm going to click on this GMS Access Select link. Because the ID that I'm working with has access to multiple districts, I'm going to pick Burlington just for the sake of example, but you should come directly into your district if you only have that one district to complete. Now, within Burlington, what I've got right now are the FY19 applications, Central Data, Continuous Improvement Plans, Perkins, IDEA, a bunch of other programs are out there. And there's one section called Continuation Grants because those of you that have Tobacco Use Prevention Awards are moving into year 3 of a 5-year cohort. I had already created the Tobacco Use Prevention Grant, but I'm going to switch out of the test environment into production for a second. And when I log in production, this is what you will see when you click on Access Select. Again, I select a district. I'll pick on Burlington again. Come down to out of the section of grants that have been created and into the section of grants that are available to be created. And down under the Continuation Grant section, you should see Tobacco Use Prevention. I'm going to go ahead and click the Create button. Please note that we've got the submissions of this grant are due 1 month from today, so that gives Beth time to review and get everything approved before July 1st. And Beth, if we need to change that date, please let me know. I'm going to click the Create button, and when I do that, it actually takes me into the newly created grant application. Each of these tabs represents the individual web pages that need to be completed before submitting the application to Beth for review there at the agency. Now, rather than beginning going through this grant, I'm going to click this link in the top right that says Click to Return to GMS Access Select. When I do that, you'll notice instead of having to create the grant now, in the continuation grant section, now the tobacco grant has already been created, and if I wanted to work on this in multiple sessions, I can simply click on Open right now. By opening the grant, it will take me back into the same grant that we just created 30 seconds earlier. Now again, I'm going to leave the production environment and go back into the test environment where I already have a grant filled out that we can go through the process to submit. Again, we've talked in earlier training sessions for other grant programs that on this Access Select page, you'll see the revision. Right now, I only have an original application. That original application is not yet submitted, so I can't create an amendment. But if it was necessary to create an amendment later in the year, once the current revision has reached final approved status, that'll allow me to create an amendment. Feedback from Beth about anything related to your application that she may have questions or be requesting you to revise would be available under the Review Summary button, but there's no review for this grant right now because the original version has not yet been submitted. And if you click Delete Application, it really will, so please don't. But there are sometimes that's appropriate, so that's why that button's out there. We've preloaded the system with $30,000 allocations for all 18 or so of the LEAs in the state that are receiving tobacco use prevention funds. And we believe we've got almost everybody loaded into the system with the appropriate level of authority. Most of you have data entry authority for your LEAs to begin working through this grant application. The first page that I'm on right now, I'm going to come back to the submit page and unlock this application for a second. When I come into the first page, it's an overview or general information page, and it just talks a little bit more about what is this grant, and I mentioned a second ago that this was the third year of a 5-year cohort, but this says 4-year cohort, and Beth, please correct me if I misspoke on that. But the point is that this is a continuing award, and so you've already gone through and been entered into this cohort, and now we're just moving into year 3. Some of the objectives have been modified for year 3, and Beth has been giving us input on how she wanted this application revised as we moved into year 3 or the FY19 year. Here on the overview page, there's a timeline of events here for during this current fiscal year. Talks about the fact that we're going to put this application online today, and you can read through what all of these events and dates are through the rest of this page. Contact information page is something that's common throughout every application within the system. Some basic information about who is the authorized representative at your district or at your LEA, who's your fiscal manager or business manager. We do actually have this facility here where you can check this checkbox to add additional email addresses. This gives you the ability, when an application is submitted to the agency, Beth is going to begin a review process. She will either accept it or she will return it back to you for changes. If she returns it back for changes, a system-generated email will be sent to the individual at your district who submitted the grant. Now, that's going to be your district superintendent. And the point is, that's probably not the person who needs that information. It's more than likely it's the person who edited the application, who created it, that we need to get that feedback to. So please go ahead and enter your own email address, or whoever needs to take action once something is returned for changes. And you can put as many as 5 different email addresses out there that should be CC'd when those system-generated emails are sent out, those automated approval or disapproval notices. Okay. So again, contact information page, fill that out, hit Save Page at the bottom of the page. The Program Detail tab, the third tab in, and again, common structure, start at the leftmost tab, work towards the right. Click on Program Detail. I had entered an email address on the contact information page, but I never saved it, and so the system is saying, hey, you're about to lose what you typed because you didn't hit save, and for the purposes of this training session, that's fine. I'm going to click leave. Takes me over to program detail, but the program detail is broken down into two sub-tabs, Smart Objectives and Management Plan. This is the Smart Objectives page where we have a series of narrative response questions based on the SMART objectives for this grant program. And it talks about the fact that there are 7 SMART objectives for FY19, the first one being the quality of your assessment strategy. Read these questions, please, and go ahead and type in answers, or if you prefer to put your answers in a Word doc or a Google doc and then copy and paste them into these fields, that's allowable as well. And there are just 7 questions, each of which is capped at a total of 5,000 characters. You'll notice there's a character counter here, so that as I'm adding more text, that counter continues to increase. And when you approach 5,000, it'll give you a warning message. Now, if you paste from Word or Google Doc into this field and you type 7,000 characters, that will all paste, but when you attempt to save it, it will tell you that you've added too much text and it will require you to drop back under that limit. So again, having that data in an external document is a safe way to make sure that in the event that there's an unexpected error with one of the system web pages, you still have that as the original source. What we want to make sure it doesn't happen is that somebody types in all 7 of these questions, then the system, you've timed out or there's some other error, and then you wind up losing everything you've typed. So that's why, again, if you put it in an external document, that minimizes the risk of that potential issue. So these are the different SMART objectives. Won't speak to exactly each one, but at the bottom of the page is Save Page button to save that content. And then we'll move over to the second sub-tab, the Management Plan page. On the Management Plan page, and please keep in mind that the notes that we put in here were just some things that we put in here for testing. You know, obviously, you know, Beth was just typing in an email address just for the purposes of verifying this. That's not really a valid answer to, you know, please put the name of the chair of your existing SU-wide whole school, whole community, whole child team. When you go into your grant application in production, and remember I just switched out of test and into production, you're just going to have blank fields to start with, and that's where we need you to fill that out. You go back over into the application, and again, I was on the management plan. There are 3 different management plan areas that need to be spoken to here. Click Save Page at the bottom of that. With the SMART objectives and the management plan completed, we'll move into the budgeting process. Now, this is where the Agency of Education has moved out of the business of doing forward funding. The submission of AOE 2.0s will not occur under FY19. The payments process will be rolling out training for business managers in the month of July about how to complete the claims process, but this budgeting process is something that's common across all grant programs, be it the CFP, IDEA, or even tobacco use prevention. I clicked on the budget detail tab, and what happens is it brought up the fact that there is a total of $30,000 available for budgeting, and in fact you must budget all $30,000. That is the requirement for the tobacco grant. There are some programs that allow you to budget less than your allocation, but tobacco requires that you budget the full allocation. And so, again, here on this page, the total amount that was available for budgeting, we're going to enter in line items here, and keep in mind that, you know, these line items are the first breakdown, the primary sort, if you will, is what we call an object code. And when I open up this first line, this first drop-down, it tells me, well, is this for salaries, or is it for benefits, or is it purchase services? And supplies is something that, you know, may come up. I'm not sure if equipment's something that will come into play with a tobacco grant, but certainly debt service is not something that would be an allowable use of funds for the tobacco program. The point being, this is consistent with the overall agency chart of accounts that is being rolled forward. So all grant programs have all of these object codes in there. You can select, you know, to the extent that purchase services is a likely, if you're going to bring in a speaker, just for example. Well, we'd select purchase services, and is it for instruction, curriculum development, staff training? These are the valid function codes. Function codes are the secondary level of breaking down the proposed expenditures for any grant program. So I'm going to just, for argument's sake, say that this is for instructional staff training, and a brief description of what this is. Well, bringing in speaker for PD, for professional development. And I'm going to go ahead and change these lines just for a second here. I had already spent my full $30,000 while testing, so I'm going to just put in that this is $2,000 we're spending on this. Now, because of those two lines that were previously out there, I'm now up to $32,000, which exceeds the amount that I have available. It says, well, all right, we saved that as a warning message at the top that says you're now overspent by $2,000. You can see that down in the amount remaining down here at the bottom. So I'll change this line item down to $27.99 that we just had in for testing again. And now we have that amount to exactly $30,000, which is exactly what needs to happen as a prerequisite to be able to submit. Now, just to show as an example, I'm going to change this from $1 to $2. And now I will be overspent by $1 exactly. I've got $30,001 budgeted. So I'm going to show how that works out at the time that we attempt to submit this grant application. The budget summary tab is the next tab over that shows where have you budgeted those funds to? Well, I put that $2,000 in purchase services for instructional staff training. There was administration of grants. Those are your direct admin costs. That's where we have the $2 right now. Obviously, we wouldn't really put that number in there. And then we had our extracurricular activities for just shy of $28,000, for example. The object code and function code and description have to be enough information for Beth to look at those and determine that, yes, those are allowable, allocable, reasonable costs for this grant program. And so, and if she can't substantiate those activities as allowable and reasonable and necessary under the rules, under the legislation that enacted this program, then she's going to return that application back for changes to you. So the summary page, nothing to be completed here. It simply shows you, information about, what is it that you've budgeted your money to. I can see, for example, that I've got 6% of my total funds budgeted to instructional staff training. With the budget complete, we move on to the assurances process. This is one of the prerequisites to being able to submit the application. Only district superintendents will have access to the Save Page button here. Those of you that are, curriculum coordinators or are other staff at the LEA that don't have superintendent level authority will not be allowed to agree to these assurances. But there were assurances back in a different collection called Central Data that are all the standard state terms and conditions. And now these are the tobacco-specific terms and assurances. And a district superintendent will get this message that says, by checking this box and saving this page, I read it, I understand it, and I will comply with these items. Come down here, you read through that text, you click Save Page. I've already put that, completed that. The next tab over, the Assurances Summary tab, will redisplay the date from your assurances in Central Data, as well as the checkbox that was at the top of the preceding page, the program-specific assurances page. And with both of those fields filled in, the district superintendent will have one more button here that says Legal Entity Agrees. That will populate today's date, or I did this a week ago in the test environment of May 3rd, and that's when they effectively agreed to all of the assurances that must be done before tobacco use prevention can be submitted. Leaving the assurances process, the submit page. As with every grant in the system, there is this process called the consistency check, which goes through and edits to make sure that you haven't skipped any pages or haven't left any warnings unresolved. Now, I have $30,001 on my budget right now, and I would expect that when I run the consistency check, it's going to tell me that's a problem. And in fact, it gave me that error message. The budget detail total must equal the allocation total, and it tells me what the delta is there. And so I'm going to come back into the budget detail page, And I'm going to change that $2 line item back to $1 and hit Save Page. Now, if I didn't want to keep an entire line item, for example, I have the ability on the budget page to check this checkbox that says Delete Row and then hit Save Page. When I do that, it just wiped out that whole $2,799 line item. So I'm going to go put that back out there as, just for argument's sake, I'm going to put that into personal services salaries for instruction. And most likely, if you're paying somebody's salary, you're also paying them benefits. And I'll just say instructor here. You know, you got to give Beth enough information so that she has the ability to determine if that is an appropriate use of funds under the grant program. You can put the instructor's name in here if that's beneficial. So now I'll just put in, let's see, I've got 22,000, so $79.99. That'll get me up to $30,000. And I can hit calculate totals to do the work, or I'll just hit Save Page, which actually does save the totals as opposed to calculate totals does not. But my point being, my amount remaining is now exactly $0. Go back to the Submit page because I just resolved the only consistency check error, and I re-click the consistency check button. And now it says your consistency check was processed and that locked the application on this date and time. Well, and what does lock the application mean? If I go back to program detail, just for argument's sake, and I come down to the bottom of the page, there's no save page buttons. That's exactly what happens with locking an application. If you decided, well, I still want to make some changes, that's fine. You can click on Unlock Application. That will wipe out the consistency check, and it will reinstate the save buttons at the bottom of all the pages that you're allowed to save. But now I'm ready to go ahead and submit this application. So rerun the consistency check again. And now, at this point, those of you that have data entry rights are allowed to submit your application to your district superintendent. But it's the district soup that actually can submit it to the agency. Now I'm logged in as a superintendent to illustrate some processes here in the test environment. When I click on Submit to AOE, what's going to happen is the application moves from created status to submitted status, and that's what happens in the test environment when I don't have someone set up to review this. So I'll go back and change that here right after we get off the phone, but the point being that when I hit Submit, a notification will go to Beth and say, you know, Burlington just submitted their tobacco use prevention grant, and it's now time for you to go out and complete that review. When she completes that review, she may wind up accepting it and moving it on through the process of review by the fiscal staff and leadership at the Agency of Education, or she may say, listen, I have a concern about your management plan or your SMART objectives or your budget line items, in which case she would put that into a review checklist. And that review checklist is available here. If she returns your application back to you for changes, you'll get a system-generated email along with everyone that was entered on the contact information page. And this review summary button will then show the comments that Beth made that are what she's asking you to take action on to revise your application before resubmitting it. Since I switched out of test into production, since this is in not submitted status, I can't show you the review summary because there aren't any, we haven't gone through the review process for this grant yet. Well, with that being said, Beth, I'm going to ask you here in a second if you've got anything you'd like to add to this process, and also we can certainly open the floor up to anyone in the field that's got questions about completing this. So, Beth, is there anything you wanted to add or wanted to make sure I covered again before we close up here?
I don't think so. Yeah, just as I put in the chat box, I had filled this out in a non-serious way, just to test out the system. So the answers that you saw in there were just things I made up just to have something in the boxes. But no, other than that, I don't think I have anything else to add.
Very good. Thanks. Yeah, I apologize for putting you on the spot there. No, I didn't tell you that I was going to be showing that particular application. That's my fault. But you know, what we had to do was make sure that that all of the fields accepted text, and exactly what the text was wasn't necessarily the point of that testing exercise. A couple quick items for those of you that haven't completed a grant application before. Please don't ever use your back button of your browser. That has a tendency to cause errors because you're not actually getting the most recent version of the content from the system. And also, when you go through the review summary process, you're going to need to have the pop-up blocker disabled, whether you're using Internet Explorer or Chrome or another browser. If you please disable your pop-ups for the GMS website, that will allow you to see those reimbursement, the comments that were entered on the review checklists. With all that being said, does anybody else that's out in the field have any questions about this right now? Okay, just a quick reminder that on the login page there are various links to this very generic messages about this process. We're going to put a link to this recording out here on this page here. It's probably sometime on tomorrow so that folks can come back and review this if they need to. If you have technical questions, you'll notice in the bottom of every web page is a link to this email address where the GMS help desk resides. Please go ahead and send a message there. Or if it's a question about, you have a question about your management plan, that's probably a better email to Beth because the help desk isn't really suited to provide programmatic expertise. That's Beth's area of expertise. So Beth, am I correct in remembering that June 10th is the date that you'd like to have all these applications submitted, or was a different date what you had in mind?
Your question is about when the application deadline is?
Yes. When do you want them submitted?
By June 1st.
June 1st. Okay. Sorry.
And then that just gives me enough time that if they need to have any changes or revisions that gives us time to get that done before July 1st.
Thank you. I will change that date so that on the Access Select page so that it says these grants need to be submitted by the 1st of June. Had a question just come in on the chat facility from one of the folks that was participating in the training session the other day for the CFP. If you go into these narrative pages, you can paste in text from a Google Doc or a Word doc. There are some special characters that can come in, as particularly from Google Docs. If you have an ellipsis, we ran into a problem with that one time, and we had to put a code change into the system with ellipses. So, again, great example of why you want to make sure that that content is saved in a Google Doc or a Word doc before you ever paste it into these fields. We will run into a couple technical bumps. The system this is the 4th grant program to go online in the system. And so if you do have technical issues, please send them to us and we'll get those resolved as quickly as we can. So I think that's all the questions I saw in the chat line. All lines are open if anybody has anything that they'd like to say to the group. We just didn't have as big of a group on the phone today for this recording. Paul, thank you for that question. Paul endured 4 hours of this on the CFP yesterday down in Rutland, and he came back for more today. So anybody else have any final questions before we close out?
Dan, you said it would take about 24 hours for the recording to be available?
Yeah, I'm gonna convert it and send it over to the IT folks. They have to do some work to get it into the directory where all those recordings are out there, but then we'll put that online hopefully tomorrow, worst case on Monday.
Okay, great. Yeah.
All right, let's see. One more comment on the chat line just came in. Okay, just confirming that this training recording will be out there as soon as we can, and hopefully Friday, worst case Monday. That being said, this recording will be available as a link within this training section on the GMS landing page. It'll say video tutorials, and one more of them will be listed right after continuous improvement plans. This grant is live right now. It went live this morning. You can log into production, and if you don't see the create button next to in the continuation section for the tobacco grant, then please let me send a note into the help desk, and we'll double check your user ID and make sure that you have the access that you should have to be able to create that grant. Okay, well, with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close up our recording then. And again, if there are any other questions, help desk or send it to Beth, and we will respond back to you as quickly as possible. Thanks very much for making time to be here today. And again, one last question just came in. Oh, just a quick thank you. All right, we're all set. Thanks very much for joining us today. Bye-bye.